Welcome to File Exchange, a channel dedicated to elevating the voices of artists, writers, and curators who have a focus on art made with 3D software. This channel allows you to be a fly on the wall as we share philosophies, tools, and tips revolving around these 21st century tools in art. I'm Colette Robbins, and this is Sophie Kahn, my co-host. And as hybrid digital analog artists, we are always excited to see what working files are behind the art of our guests. Sophie's going to introduce our guest.
All right, welcome. We're very excited to have Chris Coleman talking to us today. Artist, professor, critical arts engineer, creative coder, and OS advocate. We've both become internet friends with Chris this year. Chris Coleman was born in West Virginia, received his MFA from SUNY Buffalo in New York. His work includes sculptures, videos, creative coding, and interactive installations. Coleman's had his work in exhibitions and festivals in more than 25 countries, including Brazil, Argentina, Singapore, Finland, the U.A.E., Italy, Germany, France, China, the UK, Latvia, and across North America. He currently resides in Denver, Colorado, and is a professor of Emergent digital practices and the director of the Clinic for Open Source Arts at the University of Denver. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yes, welcome. And it's fun to see your studio in the background as well. So, all your things, all your machines.
I'll have to say that you two have set a bar for how to set the behind the Zoom stage for a studio, and I've been wrecking my mind to try and make this feel a little bit better, because usually it's just the cables and the shells of incomplete machines, and
we know about the cables. No, there's what you don't.
I've got cables.
That happens in the hour before the recording. Yeah, no, but this is, and it's only because my studio is 100 square feet that this is all that fits in here.
All of our machines.
What you're not seeing is the hallway with the piles of while I record.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, so I think that we were just talking about how hard it's going to be to keep this one into an hour because of all of the many, I hate this phrase, but all of the many hats that Chris does wear. But yeah, if there is one particular project, one activity that you wanted to share with us first, we're really happy to see in whichever order you want to cover things.
Goodness. Yeah, I think we can dive into some of the work that I've been making over the last couple years and try and tease out some threads from it, perhaps.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think it's one thing to say that, while I deeply enjoy making installation art, it requires a kind of opportunity that's maybe different, because somebody's got to give you an entire room and a week to set up. And so it's been quite a while since I've been able to do an interactive installation for myself, while I have been doing technical production for my wife, artist Lale Mehran. We just got done doing a piece out at Vanderbilt, so part of the studio is still a wreck from making, prepping that installation and then flying to Nashville.
Yeah.
I hope maybe some people in that area can go see the piece while it's up. It's up for a few months.
Well, we'll link it up in the comments and when or in the description when we post about it.
Yeah. But yeah, beyond that, I'm just coming to terms with the fact that it was okay that I was making quicker work during the last couple of years, especially as part of the NFT art scene. And giving myself permission for that was weird.
That's because I'm
used to making animations that take 2 years and th're 5 minutes long, and it's this intense labor, and to instead say like, okay, this is going to be a 10-second piece, like, and that's okay.
I think it's been an interesting journey for everybody. Definitely we've gone through that, like, as sculptors, when there weren't physical opportunities to show sculpture. I think everybody has had to pivot no matter what their circumstance. And it's a really interesting thing to share more of sketches or things that are more quickly resolved as part of your studio practice, and to be comfortable with putting that out too. Like, that's a journey in and of itself. But yeah, if there's any particular you want to share, any, or like an animation, we'd love to see some of the visuals from the newer pieces.
Yeah. And I also think about that idea of like doing an installation before the pandemic was very much, okay, this has to be a physical space and this has to, involve a number of different logistics. But I also think about now with 3D, what you can do for an installation piece in a 3D space. I've been thinking about that a lot for myself and my sculptures. And that I'm curious to see kind of what that would look like in your practice too. But also it's refreshing to hear that the NFT context has given you an opportunity to more quickly iterate, as opposed to, the highly labor intensive projects, because I think they both have a place, and all that labor intensive, those labor intensive projects, they're going to feed into those quick outputs in a way that if you hadn't done that, they wouldn't have the same kind of impact. And I own one of the geo portraits, which I'd love to see here, if you have like some kind of like what the first one was, even, or just kind of what, or even some older ones. It's interesting to see how that evolved and playing with geometry nodes.
Yeah, I mean, let's play around with that a little bit. Oh, we're sharing the whole desktop. This is good.
Woo!
We love seeing people's desktops.
Oh, this is the stuff. Oh, this is oh, look at that desktop. Oh, I'm learning so much about you.
I mean, obviously, this is an artwork by Manolo, but and it was also used on the cover of Golan and Tega's really beautiful book about teaching digital art, and creative coding art.
Yeah.
But besides that, let's dive in a little bit here. I just didn't know if this resolution is so high that like you can't read any text, but maybe that's okay.
Yeah, no, we can see it. It's good.
We can see all the text.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the working hard drive. I've got like 5 or 6 in here. And I'm gonna take you to, we're gonna go back in time some, aren't we? All right, let's go to, so all these are like photogrammetry projects that I've been doing. But actually let's come back there. Sorry, this is where I thought the geo portraits were in there, but they're not.
That happens to me all the time, and understanding your kind of
top of it ever. It generates more. It's like a child making more mess than, like, they make the mess faster than you can clean up after them. It's like, that's my heart,
Yeah. All right. So here's the beginning of the geo portraits.
Oh, cool.
I think.
Number 2.
Let me turn on my. Let's see if this works now.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this is a very early attempt, but I think this is number 1 of the series.
Very cool.
And so here, this is a scan that I made in Argentina. A lot of these scans were made in Argentina, in Rosario, during a festival that I did. And so the attempt was to, like, how do I reframe or rethink these scans that I've gathered, a couple hundred of them. And so I've just been going through each one of them. And I set out a set of rules, and I'll just sort of open up the file here.
Beautiful working files.
I set up a set of rules that I couldn't take more than 2 hours, including rendering.
Yeah.
I couldn't let me just open up the geometry node stuff here. Oh, I wonder if no, it's here. Okay. It could take more than 2 hours. I had to use the original colors, so I didn't want to just sort of like randomly have new colors. And I wanted to have the data, whether it be vertex spacing or color or other information, like the data itself of the series of points in the scan had to have an effect on the final geometry. So I also didn't want to just have the geometry be randomly like sized or whatever.
Here's 1,000 cacti made from these vertex points or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there had to be a deeper relationship than just placing geometry across all these points. And so in this particular case, and in some ways this was a way for me to learn to use these this new Blender feature, right? So I started this at the beginning of the year with the release of Blender 3. And it's actually fairly straightforward, where I'm essentially starting with a cube and I'm positioning that cube a little bit, and then that gets this simple node of instance on points. So you just create an instance of that cube on every point. And then you can realize those instances and give it a material. But I'm doing some other work. Here's where like the color from the image is coming in, and I'm inverting it and multiplying it in terms of certain value. And then that actually ends up being part of the scale of the boxes. So the scale of the cube in one direction is affected by the color of, by the red color of the actual scan. And so the final effect is that these black cubes have a different dimension than things that have red or go to white, because white also has 100% red. So this just sort of fairly straightforward sensibility. Some of the other rules that I had is I'm only using the Nishida skybox for everything. So there's no additional lighting. It's just like, what do I get out of the sky? I think you'll see. I just turn that on here. And so I do a lot of work of just like positioning the sun and positioning the figure and trying to get the right camera angle. Is like, you know, sort of framing that final shot within the square is the, you know, final piece of the decision-making process.
That's so fun to see the nodes broken up like that, and to kind of deconstruct this image by seeing the process and how it's created. I love geometry nodes for that. I'm still very new to them. And I love the different physical skies that you can use in Blender. They're so powerful, you know, the way you can change the rotation and like what time of day it is and the mood simply by doing that. And like, I think so many people think that to do something like this, it would take, you know, 1 billion hours, but it's like, there are kind of these like painterly aspects of using 3D. And this really reminds me of how the cubists like broke down, you know, a portrait on a 2-dimensional picture plane by using all of the geometric shapes and understanding that our eyes like can, you know, capture so much more when we're looking in 3D space. I feel like there's like, you're playing with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think this one was a little bit of a breakthrough in that notion of like a painterly result that I was really excited about. Like,
yeah. And the idea, like the reduction is really interesting too, you know, like how much can you reduce? When I'm thinking of like, you know, an artist like Julian Opie or somebody who does something that's very, very limited, and that's always a really interesting game to play. I find, how much can you take away and still have it remain really recognizable, and maybe even give a little bit of a sense of who that person is or something about their affect, their gesture. So it's a fine line too with what you remove, right? Like how if you take it too far. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they're visceral too. There's like a visceral reaction to them because of that
Mm.
repetition of those instances, the geometry instances.
Mm.
yeah, and there's definitely some in here that like didn't work. Like I don't really love this one at the end of the day, but you know, you reach the end of the 2 hours and you render it and you put it out into
Yeah.
the world
Yeah.
and move on. Because the things you learn might bring you to a better result later.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And I
so,
think that's, yeah, like what, oh, sorry, Sophie, what were
oh
you
no,
going to
I
say?
was just curious, like, did these exist? Do you see these as only ever having a digital existence? Do you think these would work in the context of a gallery show if they're printed and framed, or was that not like a life that you want for these images?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, it's a hard question. You know, let me just switch gears slightly, which is some of the earlier explorations for this. So, you know, I like in some ways the work came through a few different iterations. Actually, I'm gonna
Mhm.
do this for the moment, but while I'm finding the actual files, well, let's see. Can we... Some of these files have gotten lost deeper into the archive that I can't pull up anymore.
No, I understand. But I really loved hearing too about as you're doing that, like just hearing about the roles and then also seeing the kind of trajectory, the kind of linear trajectory, but then how they have such a painterly and abstracted end result. Even though they come from like these, you know, specific kind of generated uh kind of methods in Blender. So I think that's a really cool aspect of the work. Ooh,
And it's also
okay.
a nice way to get around resolution.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of projects with Connect scans. And after you've seen one Connect scan, you've seen them all, like, and when there's 3D printed and then you look at them, you're like, oh, okay, it's a low res Connect scan. And so, but this, it's like that, take an artwork and do something to it and then do something else. So like it adds another dimensionality that benefits from the resolution. Like a higher resolution wouldn't benefit this. It would actually make it more challenging to kind of deal with as a geometry and surface and just visually. So yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this was the original festival in Argentina where I was scanning people with like the iPad structure scanner.
Structure sensor, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then I had a hard limit of 10 minutes to process the scan, pose it, render it, and then I think there's this one photograph. We would then pin them up on a wall, and people had to find themselves.
Ah,
So they would like go to the rest of the festival and come back and try and find their image. And,
yeah,
and so, like you say, I was really interested in like what what is the amount of information that you see and you still even see yourself, much less recognize other people,
yeah.
and how far can we reduce that information?
Mm-hmm.
um, what's left to pull apart and tease apart what makes us unique. um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I did like like 250 people for this over like 3 nights, which was really crazy.
Wow.
Um, and
Yeah, those time now make a lot of sense.
yeah, I was really interested in like being a caricature artist,
Mm.
but doing the opposite. So instead of giving you big ears and exaggerating your nose, I would actually remove all the information I could
Mm.
and see if there was still something there interesting there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that body of work then led me to the Secure Shell Copy series. And
Mm-hmm.
these are all prints. So they're like 20 inches by
Yeah.
40 inches.
Yeah.
Much more highly processed. They're put in a photographic background, which they're also kind of lit from that space. This is from 2016.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But playing a lot with, again, the figure, but a reduction of the figure.
Yeah.
And I think of these a lot as sculptures,
I was about to use that same word. Yeah, like they feel very, very sculptural, like something that could be fabricated.
Yeah, and like
Stretch.
this particular one is a 5-minute loop where we slowly go around the sculpture, but the sculpture is also slowly evolving and reshaping itself. And so this one, I have copies of this on an infinite object, and I really love that way of showing it to exist that way. I think, you know, a lot of the work, I would actually like to see it, I would like to see it like come back through, oops. I would like to see it come back through like VR eventually.
Yeah.
So that then like maybe it's never physically present, but that maybe it's yeah, that maybe
But
it's
VR's got a different relationship with scale, right? Like with the
yeah.
scale. Yeah. Yeah. Really
But
monitor.
it is worth saying that I have made one attempt,
Ah, yeah.
which
Heavy.
yeah, I don't know, maybe I should stop screen sharing for a
Yeah.
sec.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see this one close up.
Stop. All my windows are overlapping here. All right.
Oh, I know. That happens to me. And then my camera is like over the top of the tabs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this
Oh,
Ah.
wow.
a 3D
Oh,
milled version of one of those processed heads.
Oh, okay. What is the material?
Marble.
stone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's
Uh,
beautiful.
this was part of the. Oh, sorry, it's quite heavy.
Yeah, I know. It's heavy.
It's part of my residency. I did the Digital Stone Project, which is up in the mountains of Italy.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I highly recommend if you
I
can
think
afford.
Sophie and I need to be sent there.
Yeah.
The
I
two
know.
of us
I need a
need to
month.
like have a little file exchange stone residency.
Yeah. So it's pretty amazing and trying to you know, this is one of those things where I like the very free play of these digital models, and then having to think about how they become physical is like a whole, right? Like it's a whole other leap, as you both know well, and so in some ways it's like I enjoy the freedom of just like making things that are almost unfabricatable, or at least I'm not willing to do the puzzle of it. Um,
It's a
but
great way to put it because that's
yeah,
exactly what it is doing the puzzle of it. And also I think the ones you just showed that you were showing that were more recent, they almost have a sense of armor or some sort of kind of futuristic, maybe even sci-fi like kind of metal components that are kind of covering up the inner layers, which maybe I'm projecting because I'm so interested in armor and what futuristic armor could look like in the age of social media.
nice.
But I really, I don't know, that's the way I'm kind of responding to them. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I love the idea of a VR existence because that is a physical existence. We are physically responding, like what Sophie said, like with scale, but then they don't have to deal with gravity and they don't have to deal with like the material concerns that are you know, in the IRL world, or the or off-screen world. These are the, you know, very challenging descriptions for me. It's like knowing how to describe the physical and the digital because the digital is so physical. And
And then
yeah,
someone will inevitably jump in on Twitter and be like, well, don't forget the internet is made of wires and servers and data centers.
right.
I'm like, yeah, I did know that actually.
Yeah, yeah. I know
it's a series of tubes, you know.
I know.
God,
so that's why I'm tenderly
Twitter,
stepping
I
around
know.
those.
Back away slowly.
I try. But no, this one is, I also wanted to say that the artist, the painter Luke Toymans, like the color palette that you have, I think kind of references that as well, since he's working directly from photography and using the colors based on those photographs. Like, so that kind of photographic reference, the fact that you're keeping the color scheme, I think that brings in another layer of a painterly influence.
Yeah, some days I wish I had the time to sit down and like do the underpinnings of something like this as a sort of digital painting.
Send it
Like,
to China.
yeah, I feel like we're really close in VR that like but like I don't really want to wear the helmet for 2 hours while I try and like do
Yeah.
the coloring or
Yeah.
but I feel like we're still like two physical steps off from really having the freedom to do that. But like when this piece in particular, and I mean, what I'll end up doing with a lot of these pieces is actually doing a little bit of a random play into there. And so then I do end up like even here, so this is, I'm doing a little bit of decimation on the original model in order to get the results on this one. And so then I'll be playing with like, okay, like what is the result of like a 5% decimation instead? And you see it actually pretty dramatically changes the figure and the results. But if I go up to 7, so a lot of my time is actually just spent doing this, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's like painting. What happens when you like mix a color and then add this medium and then it reminds, this is why I liked 3D. It like reminded me of painting.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you're like, okay, so right now my triangles go from, this to this. And so instead, I want them to go to, 30.
Yeah. But it's good that you're not kind of too beholden to those rules. Like, I think that there is a mindset in some of the kind of creative code work where people come up with a set of rules and then they're terrified to deviate because it might introduce some kind of flawed and human aesthetic judgment into the equation.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I did a program years and years ago. It was an interdisciplinary architecture program, and they were very into generative architecture at that time. And all of the people used to talk around with this like great angst in their voice about, they'd run this algorithm and it would generate the building form. But then like, oh, when your person hits stop, then you're polluting it. There's like a human decision in there, like God forbid,
Right.
So I think it's, you don't want to get too hung up on these rules, even though you like generate them for yourself. So it's good to see that it's that balance between the kind of the external system that you've built, but then there are also the aesthetic decisions constantly being made in the background that I think also is something people don't always notice in digital art, like the craft and the decision and the editing, like the editorial work that's being done, even with generative work. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the big discussion in the AI art right now, which is like, oh well, yes, in theory, I typed a series of words and it gave me an answer, but in actuality, I tried hundreds of different words for hours and it gave me thousands of different solutions, and I had to pick the one that expressed what I wanted to say.
And to me, that goes back to debates around photography, but people forget that. Like I had I've told this anecdote on this channel before, so I'm obviously really bitter. But in grad school, I had a photography professor be like, "Well, you didn't do any of this. The machine did all the work. You just pressed a button." I'm like, "Are you shitting me?"
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea, I guess for somebody like you and for artists like Sophie and I as well, it's like playing with AI did not seem far off from exactly what you're doing, where you're changing the parameters. I mean, a word or an input or an image input is a parameter. I am a little nervous about styles being used or taken, artists like particular styles, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out since it's copyrights. That's my only concern about AI. In terms of it stealing art, it seems insane.
Right.
But like stealing just like artists' jobs, I think that's insane. But I think in terms of like copyrights and how we can deal with that moving forward, I think that's going to be tricky, and maybe blockchain technology can help somehow with that. Not sure. But it's amazing to see the different mood those different parameters create in your geo portraits. And I also think a lot about how scanning is the new sketching, or the new, kind of portrait, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, like a caricature drawing. It's like, I mean, Sophie scanned me the first time she met me, and then I used that in a sculpture. And like,
Nice.
for me, that I used to have people come to my studio when I first became an artist in when I was in my teens, and I do portraits of everybody. And I feel like these are the new ways to do that and connect with people in this time frame with these contemporary
on your hard drive too, which is funny. Like this archive of people's images that you've collected. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh,
it's
textures.
it's a little bit weird, and then at the same time, like it's also great to have, yeah, as you say, like have a set of source material that you can really make sort of anything from it. I was thinking about some of the other projects that I'm doing with different kinds of scans, and I've been doing, and I still haven't figured out how to finish a couple of projects where I've been doing photogrammetries of the same bouquet of flowers every day for like a week or a month, and watching them go from bloom to decay. Here you can see some of the lilies are already falling apart over here, and the tulips have died in this particular day. So this is like day 9, as opposed to day 2. And these are the raw photographs that then get turned into the photogrammetry. So yeah, here you have all those lilies are still sort of just buds at this point. And then turning these into scans with the photogrammetry. This is a sort of mesh conversion. I'm always interested in the difference between what you get, the sort of lushness of these point clouds. In this particular case, it's 38 million points to do this particular scan. And then trying to turn those into meshes is always an interesting process. How the computer decides when and where to extrapolate and make bridges between points. It's actually an argument I'm currently having with a number of those software. I was actually up late last night playing with reality capture and trying to understand how it decides to do some of this extrapolation versus metashape, because neither of them allows you to really adjust how much extrapolation happens.
That's interesting.
There, and you can't access it under the hood.
So then can you export this as like an FBX, or like what's the next?
So I mean, one of the exciting things is that I've just begun playing with the way that Blender now allows you to import point clouds natively and then render those as GPU points. And so that's opened up a whole new kind of opportunity, but that's of like 2 months ago is that capability just came out. I've been using like a different plugin that lets you bring in point clouds, and it was kind of a hack in the way that it did it. But I'm just starting to get a handle on how we're able to do that with the new capabilities. But for me, I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I've got sorry, and I'll just bring up one of the other ones here. This is a longer project that has already resulted in this animation. Let's see.
And I see the aesthetic of the point cloud in your geoportraits, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Because those all sort of emerge from the points themselves. This was what happens when you render in Blender and you forget to change your start and end keyframes, because it automatically softens the keyframes.
Ah,
Oh, well, that's good to know.
This is before I turned the keyframes linear. Um,
okay.
but this is like one of those flower bouquets, and then I've I've basically done a combination of having the original scan plus a version of the scan that is using the geometry nodes to create this sort of other architecture on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of two scans combined into one, which I think is
I
quite
mean, this is
nice.
incredibly painterly. It's like the brush strokes in sort of three-dimensional space, or even like hair, or yeah, it's really organic.
Um,
I'm also seeing body parts. Is that just me?
No, yeah, I saw that too, like hair growing out of skin, you know?
Yeah, like a finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty interested in like, yeah, that space where there's kind of hair and flesh and biological and
Mm-hmm.
obviously I put it into sort of space. It's almost in like outer space for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So here you can see the final model, but like sorry, you all are in front of. I'm gonna move you to the other screen here real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can see, I can turn off. So this is here's the original model,
Yeah.
right? So this is
Oh,
just
That's the
being,
mesh.
yeah.
The point cloud, right? That's the point. Well, that's the point cloud that's had the surface like draped over the point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a mesh.
Yeah.
This was one of the meshes out of Metashape, and you can
Yeah.
see it's done some pretty crazy extrapolation down
Mm.
here, where it's just made up a whole bunch of points. But
it's
the
like
surface,
dripping.
yeah, yeah. But the surface is quite nice. And then this is the geometry node version, and you can see it's really drawing from the colors of the original model. But
Mm.
I've also dulled those colors so that the
Yeah.
flower underneath actually is an emitter material, so it's emitting some light.
Mm.
Whereas,
Ah, okay.
whereas
So it's eliminating the rest of it a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I like to play a lot with sort of the nature of how the materials might interact with each other. Um, but you know, I love some of the places where, you know, like these stamen or pistils. I think they're stamen. I always forget which is which. Um,
It's been
I
a long
know.
time
Me
since I've
too.
played, long time.
Yeah.
um, and you know, and this one I'm using this particular geometry node that somebody released already, where they've just put in a bunch of code and it does curl noise, which is a kind of variant on the mathematical process for Perlin, but it curls in on itself
Okay.
instead, um, as opposed to just being a constant flow. And so you can
Mm.
actually adjust how much it curls over time, which is quite
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it's fairly similar in terms of how I'm playing with the shape and form, um, and then just turning that into a curve, and then uh, putting that across all of the points by using like a transfer attribute and some things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I also just I keep thinking about as the mind of a 3D printer. I keep thinking like, how would you prep this for print, and how would this turn out with 3D printing? And then I keep thinking,
Yeah.
no, this could not be a 3D print, because what's so cool is that these things are like kind of folding and unfurling in on themselves,
Yeah.
which is not something you could show successfully, maybe unless it was glass,
Right.
you know. And I mean, how you would do that, you know, or maybe metal, but yeah, no. So that's I like that they're playing with this digital medium so successfully in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And
The
so,
amount of work you have is very impressive, by the way. It's a lot of files. And this is being said from a file machine.
well, again,
But you're
like this,
very prolific. It looks like
this,
you're working like every single day on these.
well, you know, photogrammetry is fun because you can essentially start it and come back in an hour and see how it's going, and so you can work on prepping for classes or doing
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
and some of the Blender stuff is the same way. Like I'll do a stack of modifiers and I'll hit a button and I have to wait a half an hour to see like the new calculation for some of the modifiers in Blender.
Right.
Um, and so you get this habit of like, I actually work on multiple desktops. And so it's like, here's the workspace like for classes.
Yeah.
Here's the workspace for photogrammetry, and here's the workspace for Blender.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you've got
This
a
is,
pipeline for each, you know. Yeah, yeah. So in the interest of time, I think we might need to move on to some of your curatorial work.
okay.
If we could have a quick chat about the Feral File show that I was very happy to be a part of recently.
Does that look okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, looks
It's
good.
beautiful.
All right. Yeah, this was it was a huge honor. I think this show very much emerged from my own personal interest of not only being an art collector, but um, deeply appreciating the way that artists are bridging the space of the digital and the physical. And some of them, for some of them, while their work really evokes it, it was their first time. And for
They're kind
some,
of fabricating, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and for some people like you, Sophie, this is a space you've just been operating in for years.
Mm. I
And
have been
so,
fighting with the customer service team at Shapeways for a decade now, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like one of my favorite lines is, "But I printed it at home," like,
Yeah.
and it was fine.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but it didn't crash the industrial build that had like 500 other people's jobs in it, you know, cost them $20,000 in one thing.
That's right.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, maybe you could take us through like a quick tour. I can talk about my file last, but if we could have a look at some of the other artists' projects too, and just talk a little bit about how the idea for the show initially came about. Yeah, that'd be great.
And do you do a lot of curating? I know you teach, you have a platform for that it educates people on open source software and you're a big advocate for that. But yeah, like how did you get into curating and how did this show come about?
Yeah, I've done little bits of curating over the years, probably 5 different shows. I only curate every few years, and it's always just out of a space for love of some work that I'm just like, somebody should be putting this work together. Like I'm not like the super curator, but like I feel like I know these people and I can put their work in a room together. And so it's both an extension of like the network that I've been able to build over time, and just it comes from a space of love, right? Like all of these artists that are in the show are people whose work I've admired for at least 18 months, I suppose.
Yeah.
Others I've actually been following their work for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Wow.
so who wouldn't, find some of their favorite artists and be like, I really want to work with you on something. And
Yeah.
and instead of asking for a collaboration or something, to be like, I just want to celebrate your work. And so in some ways I created the show, when I think of like Feral File, and I'm a pretty intense collector on Feral File, but like if I was like, what is a show that like I dream could happen? And it would be these people, and it would include that every work in the show also has a physical print, like
Yeah.
a physical component. And to
Yeah.
me, that was the core of the proposal, was that not only are these artists who are thinking about that bridge, the space of who we are and how we exist in physical space versus digital space, but that the artworks themselves would both exist in physical and digital space. So that was, I put in that proposal like more than a year ago.
Yeah.
And so I was I proposed very early to the Feral File team, and was super excited about, I guess, late fall, maybe December last year, when Casey was like, "All right, you're doing the show, figure it out."
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of that said, maybe just to speak briefly about the works.
Yeah, I wish we could have had every one of these artists on to talk, but it would have been
too long. Like a 4-hour episode. Yeah.
I'll try and be brief and show them really quickly. But we'll start with Renjunko, also known as Cyber Weird. Renjunko herself has a really interesting existence where she's got multiple internet personalities. She's also half Black and half Japanese. And thinking about her own sort of dual existence. And so with this particular work, she's created an alphabet that takes, I don't know if it's katakana or hiragana, but one of the Japanese alphabets. And she has given it the curliness of Black hair. So instead of the sort of perfection of, Japanese line work, right? The perfect stroke, the perfect sort of emotional sensibility, she's given it this other take of rethinking the alphabet. And so this coin, actually on one side is the alphabet, so the 27 letters, and then you can use that to decode the message on the other side of the coin. And so she's got a sort of hidden message on here. And so for this particular piece, you'll get a bronze coin that's been 3D printed, and you'll be able to feel those letters and put it in your pocket, which will be really nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm excited. And that's one fun thing about Feral File is that each participating artist and the curator gets an edition of all of the other work. So I'm really excited to see all of these when they arrive.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're working on the order sheet.
I love that.
Actually.
That's what we just did with our recent organic material piece too. So we all got an addition. I think that's so amazing for artists developing the connections with other artists by doing these exhibitions. It's a nice gesture.
Yeah, I agree. Casey and the Feral File team have really been quite thoughtful about like what it means to curate for artists. And really serve the artists first.
Absolutely.
So
and these can be purchased via Tezos, Ethereum, fiat, right? Like all of the coins,
credit
essentially.
Credit
card. Okay.
All the editions are $210. That includes the print and shipping.
Wow.
They're a steal.
Really affordable.
Yeah. If you're wanting sculptures from some of the amazing artists like Sophie, you should definitely get in on this. La Turbo Avedon, who of course exists only in digital space, but is constantly challenging our notion of how real is this other space to us. Someone who's already full-time existing there and asking, when we will join her or them. So I really love the questions that they're bringing up. This particular piece as an artwork is a still, but the frame that you're seeing here, this she calls it a relic viewport. It's being printed in stainless steel and polished, and
beautiful.
And so that will actually be available to you to hold in your hand and actually look. The idea is that you look through this and you see a new kind of version of reality, whether it's in the past or the future. And so her characters or their characters, the same day we had our opening, La Turbo's characters actually found these relics in the metaverse that's being created by La Turbo Avedon. So there's the world building that's happening. And so at the same time, you get pieces of this.
Very cool.
Of course, Matthew Plumer Fernandez is someone who's been 3D printing for a decade. probably one of my early 3D printing heroes in thinking about taking something, processing it in a digital space, and then outputting that into color physical space is really amazing. And so what you're seeing here is an animation. He used some AI, so this isn't like After Effects blend frame, but it's instead like an AI tool that's blending from one thing to another. But it's going through all 100 iterations of this model, because every single person who orders this gets a different it's a different pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is again crazy. They're all one of one
Right?
sculpture.
It's called a Z-Corp material. Is it the sandstone they call it on Shapeways?
No, they're phasing out the sandstone. The quality is
Oh,
too
good.
low.
That sucked.
Yeah. So they've got a new material that looks much better, and I think the color's going to be better as well. This is about 11 centimeters tall, so it's going to be a great little figure. And it's a combination of, I think, a couple hundred models of Mickey Mouse that have been downloaded, which are all of course, violations of the Disney copyright. And then he's merged them all and kind of extrapolated all the models into a unified model to sort of draw out what was similar across all the models, sort of an averaging in a way. And so then he's published this sort of ultra, it's Meta Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So yeah, Meta Multi Mouse, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's a really beautiful idea, and I like the opportunity to collect like an original, one of a kind Matthew Plumer Fernandez piece, especially in this series, which again was an important series of works, especially early on, is such a great opportunity. Jeremy Bailey is also someone who has multiple identities. He is famous new media artist Jeremy Bailey. You'll meet famous new media artist Jeremy Bailey, and then some days you'll meet Jeremy Bailey.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's always an interesting conversation. And he's taken the task kind of literally, where he's actually selling slices of his own head as coins.
Yeah.
So these will come as bronze coins. So each person only gets one slice.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want more Jeremy, you need to buy more Jeremy.
Yeah.
So I think all of us artists in the show are actually going to get pieces of the neck because it's being distributed in order of purchase. And so the last person will actually get a very small coin, but it'll be the top of the head.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
And he made this really great AR piece as well to go with it.
Yeah.
So everybody sent a GLB like for you to use.
Yeah, so we had to upload 100 object plus texture folders for Matthew's piece. We had to upload 100 STLs for Jeremy, and then some people gave us GLBs, some people gave us other kinds of models or movies. So like Rodell made a really beautiful GIF, but he also, if you collect this, you get a really high resolution movie of this. But also,
nice. Do you have the 3D print? And he was just our last episode of File Exchange had featured Rodell Warner.
He's great.
He's incredible. Highly recommend.
I'll show you this really quickly here.
Yeah.
But we spent like a week trying to understand how to, I'm showing them kind of in order, how to get the results that he wanted so that like there was still something inside within, because you have to have all the resin drain out. Otherwise, when you cure it, it can actually sort of explode. So playing with like, what are this kind of spaces necessary that you don't just get air bubbles? And all the way to, this was a version, sorry, I'm trying to get the focus. There's a version with sort of a larger leaf in there. And this is close to, but not the final where there's
Oh,
almost
wow.
a set of fauna inside of here.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful.
And so it's like thinking about even the limitations of like, okay, Shapeways isn't currently doing 2-color transparent prints, right?
Yeah.
But how can we instead suggest some of the same ideas? And so, and see here, I'll also mention that one of the other people in the show is my partner, Lali Mehran, who has also been doing quite a bit of 3D printing for her installation work, but not really as a standalone object. She created this pretty intense GLB piece, animated on purpose to be quite vibrant.
I love
this is way faster
this is gorgeous.
than they normally
are.
And thinking a lot about texture and reflection. And there's a figure called Huma, which is a sort of double-sided bird in Iran, which has to do with, I don't know. You can read her whole description. I don't want to do it injustice by trying to repeat it. But it's taken the place by these hummingbirds, which also have a really interesting set of mythology in terms of strengths. And she was thinking about how the collective can be empowered against, issues or things that need to be tackled. So we might all be small bits and pieces, but together we could actually take on something more intense.
Yeah, it almost looks like a weapon.
Yeah. This is, it is really quite encompassing aesthetically, isn't it? It's a little dizzying, but it's great. All right, I'm happy to talk about this. Now,
share your file.
I've never shared my screen on File Exchange before, so you're going to see my own messy.
Wait, we shared screens before for the Patty Johnson episode, I think.
Oh, we did.
But it's been a while. It's been over a year.
A little while. So, actually what I might do if we have the time, I may end up editing this out if I can't find the images. Oh, good. No, okay. So my piece actually came out of a series that I did like just pre-pandemic, which was a residency. There's a body of work that I created during my residency at Pioneer Works in 2019. And it's called The Divers. And this was a collaboration with Butoh performers Azumi U.A.E and Cindy Boots. And this was kind of the culmination of it. It was not a performance per se. We thought of it as like a work in process showing, but I captured all of the data that became this project live within the space of about 2 hours during a kind of performance screening thing that we did in the studios upstairs at Pioneer Works. And the scan was being broadcast on this screen so people could see from the outside. And so when it came time to create this piece, like I've made a lot of work based on those scans. I have a VR show that you can see on my website. I can show this very quickly. Thank goodness for quick access. This same model has been fabricated as a 21-foot bas relief. That's going to be, I'm going to have details for that later this year, but this is a CNC mill, really large piece inside a corporate building, Lower Manhattan. But for this, I wanted to make a video, and then I also wanted to I wanted to kind of shed a little bit more light on the scan process. So let me see. It's okay. I'm definitely going to do a little bit of editing to get rid of my like umming and my digging for files here. This will be off the record. Okay. So this was one of the original videos. And I actually had to outsource, and I normally don't outsource too much, but I did this in Houdini, which is like above my pay grade. And there are about 250 small floating shells in this 3D scan, and I wanted them to come into visibility one by one in this painterly way, so they slowly develop through the screen. And so the original video is quite dark, and it's actually 3 minutes long. I'll just scrub through it for the sake of time. And then loops back. For feral file, I wanted something that was obviously like a little bit faster paced. So we did the video that you can see on the site. And then I also I have renders of my physical pieces here. And hopefully they come out of Shapeways. Okay. So these are kind of small fragmentary pieces from that larger sculpture, because the sculpture itself is so large, if I shrank it down, it would have felt to me like much too dinky. So I took little parts of it instead, almost like these little relics that people get. But then
and what about the little like fragmented tiny pieces? That's part of the file that's being printed? Like in the hand, there were like a couple tiny little disconnected.
Yeah, that's part of the file. So this is actually the original model, and this is the gesture that she's making.
Very cool.
Sort of depending on the work, we're seeing it from multiple angles, and we're seeing multiple little pieces of it that have been removed. So, you know, like we're seeing the hand, or we're seeing like the foot here. Beautiful. So yeah, so it's just like a
love
little,
the foot.
People get just a little piece of it depending on which piece they receive. So yeah, so that's my work that's in the show.
And it's exciting because if you get more than one piece, then you get different pieces. It's random otherwise. But and I've already taken Sophie up on that opportunity to buy all 5 pieces. Yeah, so that we have the full array.
The full series. Yeah.
I can't wait to see the prints too. Do you have any samples of those yet, or is that still coming?
Yeah, no, it should be soon. I've got a piece in my cupboard.
Yeah. Okay. And I also just want to, as you're looking, I wanted to say too that, you know, Chris, it's so interesting to see. I think it's a big part of your practice to be kind of that you love all of these artists as well, like the love of your of these other artists and the curating and kind of elevating them in these different projects you know, I feel like that feeds your work. And I think sometimes people think, oh, if I spend any time doing things for other artists, that I'm not going to have enough time for my work. And I actually think that it can be the opposite. We found that with teaching and with file exchange and with different projects, different collective projects. And I think this is another example, because you're growing your collection, you're growing these connections as well. And Sophie is an example of that. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Sophie.
Yeah, no. I know that was actually what I kind of had some really similar question for Chris. No, I don't know. These are actually different. This is a smaller scale, and these are only fragmentary. But this is
beautiful.
We're getting on the these we print on the 10 log that has the dual extruder, because otherwise the supports are a total nightmare to remove. But anyway, together. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that was kind of like a question. I felt like the only reason that I was like going to ask Chris that question of like, how do you do it all? You know, is that stereotypically, right? That's a question that people ask women, and they ask moms. They're like, how do you juggle all of it? You know, and I know people who are kind of insulted by that question, because they're like, what do you mean I can't handle it? Like, I know people who get mad when you say that. Like, how do you do it? They'd be like, why don't you ever ask my husband? You know, so
right. Right.
You know, I do want to be super clear, and I have leaned into this, which is like, I'm really privileged in that, like, I'm already a full professor. So like, I have a job for life. I don't have kids. I have a partner who's also an artist. And so like, both of us working 16 hours a day on art is like obvious. Like,
Yeah.
so there's
But that doesn't diminish that labor,
no,
that's
no.
still labor.
We're still you know, like we put
Yeah,
everything I mean, yeah, like the flip side is we put everything we have all the time into
yeah,
art.
yeah,
Mhm.
We live art, we teach art, we collect art, we make art. Like it's all
yeah,
the time. And so there's no, you know, we encounter a lot of other people who like have a partner that does another kind of job, and they're like, it's 5 o'clock. We're gonna do
mm,
other things from now till, you know,
yeah.
tomorrow morning. And
We're
and
gonna go like watch Game of Thrones and
right, yeah. But in our
whatever.
household, it's like it's a base level assumption that we're both doing art and art related things all the
Mm,
time.
mhm, mhm.
And sometimes that's together and sometimes that's apart, and
Yeah,
have a balance of space for that. And so for me, it's like, yes, I'm putting everything into this, which,
yeah,
you know, it's a decision, but it's also, I have space to make that decision. And I'm really
yeah.
aware of that, you know.
Yeah. But as an artist who has like really benefited from that work, like I'm very grateful that, that somebody is doing it. And it's I think that there's so much labor that makes even I don't want to say even the digital art world, but I think sometimes people assume that it's a little more automatic or it's a little more the machines are handling a little more of it. So it's something we talk about on our channel too, is just to try and highlight like the labor
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
the choices, not in a bad way, but to kind of celebrate it, the craft and the choices and the commitment that
Right.
bringing to this.
And the intuitive side of
Yeah.
connecting and exploring with these tools. And but also I think what's special about this episode and kind of I wanted to highlight as well is the community aspect of it. And that's
Mm,
how I met you as well, Chris, was through community, and through social media and through NFTs and through these digital tools. I mean, they connected us. And I think there's something about that. I also have a very similar setup with my life, being married to an artist, and, we each have our own rooms, and it's our happiest place is when we're just in our rooms making art in the same apartment.
Yeah.
Like that's, I'm living my dream life in that
Yeah.
sense. And I feel very lucky. But yeah, I mean, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that do have that space and that, quote unquote, privilege to do that. And they don't. I think it's unique to you because not everybody is community oriented or interested in the social networks that surround these different tools and artistic practices. So I think that is, worth noting. And I'm hoping that our viewers can kind of go do a deeper dive into some of the links that we're going to share in the comments, that, the different projects you've been involved with, and the open source site you've developed, along with just checking out your geo portraits, which I've collected and am a big fan of. And you've also inspired me to collect a little more and to trade and to experience that. It's that's something that's new for me to the NFT world because collecting was not accessible for me in my financial position in the traditional art world as we know it. Maybe that'll shift or change. And so I relied on trading and on that currency of respect of my peers, and so now we have an opportunity to actually purchase each other's work in a way that is not going to break the bank. And that's pretty incredible,
yeah.
that we're in this moment.
Living artists who are like our peers and our
Right.
working alongside us. Yeah, well, thank you so much. That was such a great conversation. Do you have
Yes.
any quick plugs, any upcoming projects you want us to particularly mention or put in our comments?
Oh goodness. I mean, you know, I hope this helps inspire some more love for the Feral File Show. It really is amazing. I think when the prints come in and people start seeing photos of what the physical, I mean, the digital part of the
Yeah,
show is already
yeah,
tremendous, but I
yeah.
think when people see the physical parts of the show come in, they're going to
Mm,
be pretty stunned. Just
yeah, we're
excited.
excited.
But beyond that, you know, I love to meet everybody on the internet. You know, it's one of the the joys and weird things about being in a place like Denver. I'm out of the site of action, and so it requires a little bit more connection and communication.
Yeah.
But I
I
enjoy
should
that.
say I had the opportunity to visit Denver last week and talk to Chris's class, and that was super fun. That
I
was,
loved seeing the pictures of that.
the ghost on the table. Yes.
It was a treat to have you visit us in our lovely little town. But yeah, so beyond that, I look forward to seeing what everybody is out there making, and yeah, I feel just super lucky to be participating in this wild moment, this wild decade of thinking about digital art and where it's going. And again, to you all, like, this is trying to capture some of this, and the project that you all are underdoing with File Exchange is just an important piece of how we make sure that we know what happened in the past, and and that there's something moving forward to reflect on. So thank you for that.
Oh, wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, and of course Sophie. And I have to say as well, if anybody has any suggestions for any future guests or ideas, post it in the comments or find us all on social media. We're there. We're hanging out.
Yeah.
And yes, and definitely like, subscribe. It really helps get more viewers on the channel, and so that we can keep getting more eyes on what is happening with artists using 3D tools. And on that note,
Thank
thank
you.
you.